everybody, welcome to Dakman Productions and welcome to Conahay Rail. In this video we'll be talking about covered hopper cars, and by a particular manufacturer, which is a favorite manufacturer of mine, called the Pullman Standard Company. A lot of people don't realize there's an actual manufacturer and a model of freight cars out there. I mean, it's no different than saying, you know, I drive a Dodge Charger RT, or a Ford Focus, or a Chevy Tahoe. You know, the freight cars out there are the same way. They're built by a manufacturer, and they have a model number. So let's get into more depth about the Pullman Standard Company. To start off, the Pullman Standard Company had model designations for all their line of freight cars. No different than a car manufacturer that you would drive. So, for instance, the Pullman Standard had the model designation of PS-1. That's PS-1. The PS stood for Pullman Standard-1. And the 1 was for a whole lineup of a certain type of car. And in this instance, the PS1 was for their boxcar lineup. That was their whole entire boxcar lineup. Whether it was a 40-foot boxcar, whether it was a 50-foot boxcar, whether it was a double door, single door, all the Pullman boxcars were PS1 type boxcars. So let's move on. Then you have the Pullman Standard, or PS-2. And the PS-2, well, let me get through this first. But the PS-2 is for all the covered hopper cars. That's their whole lineup of covered hopper cars. It didn't matter whether it was a 3-bay, 2-bay, the 4427, the 4750, which we'll get into here in a minute, what those mean, or the PS2 CD, which CD stands for center discharge. So if you see PS2 CD, that just means that was their lineup of center discharge hoppers. So all of the Pullman Standard covered hoppers were a PS2 model designation, no matter what their other model numbers or capacities were, or their type of roof hatches and all that fun stuff. So here's the funny story about the PS2 hopper cars that I have. So I figured that everybody knew about the model designations of freight cars. So I listed 2 freight cars for sale on a few, or on a couple places, actually 3 or 4 different places, including Facebook. And I listed them as MTH PS2 hopper cars for sale. And you would not believe the amount of emails and messages I got asking me, how did MTH get their PS2 sound system into that hopper car? And I'm thinking to myself, oh boy, what did I just do to myself? I guess not everybody knows the model designation. So I had to go back and change it all to, you know, covered hopper. I had, even though it says it right on the label, covered PS2 hopper, but apparently not too many people knew about that particular model designation. So I had to go back, and I says the PS2, I had to give everybody a history lesson, so to say. And I was like, look, I'm not saying that these have an MTH PS2 sound system, control system, or DCS system in them. These are Pullman Standard PS2 hoppers. That's the model designation of Pullman Standard. And some of them got it, and some of them say I shouldn't have listed it that way. Whatever, you know what I mean? So I just made everybody happy, took the PS2 off of it, put covered hopper on there. So that's my little story behind that. Then we move on. All the Pullman Standard PS3s are coal hoppers, or they're open hoppers. They're not covered. And I'll do one more. The Pullman Standard PS-4 is for all their flat cars. So that should give you a general idea of how Pullman Standard grouped their different types of box cars or flat cars. So all the box cars were PS1, all the covered hoppers were PS2, all the open hoppers were PS3, and all the flat cars were PS4. Whether those flat cars were 50 foot, 60 foot, 89, whatever, how many lengths they were all under the same model designation. Alright, so let's take a closer look of different hopper cars, especially with the Pullman Standard ones, and we'll go from there. Alright, so here we go. Depending on the time period you want to model, depends on what you're going to use. If you're wanting to haul grain, and you're considering to show that on your model railroad, it depends on the time period as to when you're going to use certain cars. Now, for the 50s, pretty much they haul grain by boxcar in the 50s, so that's what you'll be using. It wasn't until the 60s that they actually started using grain cars, or cars like these, hoppers for grain service or other commodities. Now, I'm not saying all grain was carried by boxcar in the 50s, because the Pullman Standard Company did start making covered hoppers in the 50s, but it just didn't get popular at that time. It was rare to see grain in hopper cars. So let's talk about this one in particular. This is a Pullman Standard PS-2 2-bay with round roof hatches, and it has a capacity of 2,003 cubic feet. So all covered hopper cars had to have on the side of them the cubic feet rating. That's the amount of product that can be held inside of the car. So here we have Pullman Standard PS-2 2003 cubic feet hopper car, and we'll take a closer look here, and there it is, 2003 cubic feet. So all your hopper cars have to have marked on them their capacity in cubic feet of how much product can be held inside of them. So let's talk about the Pullman Standard PS-2 2003 cubic foot 2-bay hopper car. So this particular 2003 cubic foot 2-bay covered hopper had a dividing wall, so multiple products could be carried at the same time with it, and its 8 round hatches allowed for quick, efficient loading. This particular hopper car was designed to haul everything from powdered chemicals to grains to construction materials such as sand or cement. These cars continued revenue service into the early 2000s, and some were sometimes found later in MOW service. Now you have to remember, I'm sure I discussed this on a couple of my videos like this, that railroads can only use a freight car for 50 years after the original build date, with a mandatory rebuild in between that time period. So if this car was built in 1955, for example, 50 years later from that date, it would have to be scrapped. They didn't care if you rewelded it, put new wheels, trucks on it, rebuilt it, whatever. You cannot use it after 50 years. That is FRA regulations. Okay, so here we have another Pullman Standard PS-2 covered hopper. So now, from what we learned, all covered hoppers are PS2 no matter how big and how much they can carry. So this version is the 4427 CD. And 4427, like I said, that designation is going to be for the capacity on the side of the car. So they made it pretty easy. So the PS2 4427 was had a 4,000. Oh, sorry about that, guys. Here we go. Had a 4,427 cubic feet capacity. And the CD just meant it had center discharge capabilities. So covered hoppers from the 4,000 to the 4,427 cubic feet capacities were built in the 60s, as with this Pullman Standard 4427. The larger capacity covered hoppers, the 4740 to the 4750 cubic feet models, were not built until the 70s. So in the beginning of the 1960s, the hopper cars took over the 40-foot box cars for grain service. They became very popular. And it was the Pullman Standard 4427 cubic feet low side cover hopper that helped make this transition successful. In 1966, the Pullman Standard 4427 low side was replaced with the high side version. The 4427 high side was visually distinctive with its high slope bays and center of gravity, which sped the unloading process of bulk commodities. The 4427 high side version ended production in 1971 after delivery of approximately only 12,000 cars. So on the Pullman Standard PS2 4427, there was a low side version and a high side version. So here is a Pullman Standard PS2 4427 high side. It had the same capacity. They just raised the bottom of the car body up to put longer chutes on them. So we'll take a look back here further on that. So now you can see the physical difference between these two hopper cars. These are both made by Pullman Standard. They're both PS2. And they're also both 4,427 cubic feet. The only difference is here you have a low side, meaning the side was lower to the ground and it had very short chutes. The high side was higher off the ground and it had longer chutes for quicker offloading. Some common product that the 4427 hauled would be grains, salts, soybeans, and even potash, because potash is light. Cargill had their own salt facilities, so they used a lot of these as well. So those are some samples of product that would be hauled. Other things would have been also malt, barley, corn, sugar, and wheat. So here is another Pullman Standard PS2. This is a 4750, which means this had a 4,750 cubic inch capacity to it. So it's a much bigger hopper car. So let's take a look at that model designation here. It's going to be kind of small, so hopefully we can read it. And there you go, 4750. So as you can see, when it came to the Pullman Standard Company brand, all the covered hopper cars had a PS-2 designation, and they just used numbers after it as for the different capacities that they were able to carry. So the different capacities designated or determined the size of the hopper car. The 4750 model was built in the 70s. So the Pullman Standard 4750 was built from 1972 through the 1990s. These hopper cars were considered to be the standard of the industry. Even Canadian railroads had these. These pretty much carried the same product as the 4427, as the railroads were capable of handling more weight and heavier loads. The cars got bigger and longer. The things you would not haul in here would be heavy stuff. Like you would not put clay in this, you would not put cement in this. The clay and cement would go in something smaller because of its weight. The heavier something is, the smaller the car has to be, because there is a weight limit on the tracks. The lighter the product is, the bigger and the more you can haul in one single car. Like potash is very, very light. So you could fill this up to the very top and it wouldn't hardly weigh anything. So here we have a Pullman Standard PS-2 2893 cubic feet capacity. This is sort of like a little bit of an odd duck. It was produced in the early 60s, used for grain service. It was basically a 70-ton grain car, but grain eventually went to 100 to 130-ton loads. So these cars got downgraded for other services. The Pullman Standard PS-2 2893 was used for hauling cement, aggregates, or grain. You could see them in sites on freight trains from the late 50s to the 90s, and a few still run today. So keep in mind I only went over one brand name of the covered hopper. There are other manufacturers of covered hopper cars out there, such as Trinity Rail, American Car Foundry, but today I just wanted to cover the Pullman Standard because that's one of my favorite brand names, and Pullman Standard has been around, or was around, for the steam era. They're no longer around today, unfortunately, but I wanted to cover them because, you know, you can go back to the 50s with a lot of the Pullman stuff. So the Pullman Standard would be a common sight on a model train because there was a common sight on the railroads. You know, Pullman was, you know, started off in, you know, making passenger cars and freight cars, and they were around for a very long time, and some of their stuff is still out there. And hopefully everybody learned something today, and I had fun with this, doing this. It was a curiosity question because one of my favorite cars to run on Conahay Rail are grain cars, because I do own a grain facility. And everything that I'm using on my grain facility are a little bit more modern 4427s and the 4750 cars. And thank you guys for watching another Dakman Productions video. Please subscribe and hit the like. It helps out my channel. And if you have any suggestions, I'd love to hear from you. I'm always taking suggestions. People wanting to know history, they're asking me to do certain things, and I like it. I notice viewers are also getting more involved with my videos that I'm creating, because I actually talked about the rotary gondolas a couple videos ago, and one of the viewers were nice enough to send me the link to a real rotary machine spinning a coal porter over to empty it, and then he sent me a video link to the Lionel rotary dump station. So I appreciate those who want to get involved, and I always respond back, and I'll talk to you guys, and if I can do something for a video, and if I have the stuff to do it with, I'll be more than happy to do it. And I like interacting with my viewers and talking to them, and you know, so I'm not one of those channels that will ignore you and turn off the lights. I like being involved with the community. All right, catch you guys later. Hope you watch out for those next Dakman production videos. Bye.